Grace Whittaker didn't do warnings. Not the weather kind, not the relationship kind, and definitely not the kind that showed up in the form of cherry red, half-dead trucks idling outside her garage like they had a story to tell. It was already 90 degrees by mid-morning, and Iron Ridge Customs smelled like sweat, metal, and the kind of stubborn that didn't quit after 10 hours on concrete. Grace was 28, 5'9", and hardwired for machines. People broke promises. Engines didn't. She was under lift 2, coaxing a torque bolt loose from a transmission that hadn't seen daylight since the Obama administration. Tank top streaked with grease, black jeans cut at the knee, hair tied back with a pencil that had more mileage than her last boyfriend. That's when she heard it. Not the usual backfire, not the growl of some kid showing off a muffler he couldn't spell. No, this one rolled up slow, confident, like it belonged here. Grace slid out from under the lift and wiped her forearm across her brow. Cherry red, high suspension. Front grille bashed in just enough to say, "You should see the other guy." The kind of truck that made the DMV nervous, the kind of truck that showed up with history. It idled for a beat. Then the door opened, and out stepped Trouble. Tall, broad-shouldered, aviators, sun-kissed hair, sleeves rolled just high enough to show forearms that looked like they remembered war, real or metaphorical. He didn't saunter, didn't strut, just walked like the kind of man who'd been dared to come here. Grace didn't flinch. "You lost?" she asked. The man smirked, leaned against the frame, and tilted his head. "Not yet. You, Grace?" She nodded. "Depends who's asking." "Jack Cutter," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, but not showy. "Shop foreman said you're the one to see." "He didn't mention I had baby arms." Jack glanced at her exposed arms, wiry, lean, muscle beneath grease. "I've seen baby arms. Yours look like they bend rebar." She cracked half a smile. "Fair enough. What's wrong with the truck?" "That's the thing. 3 shops couldn't figure it out. One said it was cursed. Another said it might explode. I figured it was your turn." She narrowed her eyes. "And if I fix it?" Jack grinned. "Then I buy you 2 drinks." She was already rolling up her sleeves, the fabric stretching just enough to catch his eye. But it wasn't the look that made her pause. It was his tone, not flirtatious, something deeper, like this was more than a dare. Her hand hovered over the hood latch. "This truck's got a past, doesn't it?" Jack's gaze darkened just a touch. "Let's just say it shouldn't be here, and if you get it running—" He took a slow step forward. "You're going to find out why." Grace's pulse ticked up. She popped the hood anyway, and just like that, the game was on. Chapter 2. The First Crack. Grace stared into the engine bay like it had insulted her mother. The wiring was clean, too clean. Aftermarket parts installed with precision, but no signature. Whoever worked on it last knew what they were doing, and didn't want anyone else to. "You didn't install any of this?" she asked without looking up. "Nope," Jack replied, hands in pockets. "Bought it off a guy in Reno. Said it came with a reputation. Didn't elaborate." Grace snorted. "Yeah, well, so did my ex. Didn't mean he could idle without stalling." She traced a line of cables to the fuse panel. One fuse had been taped over crudely, black electrical tape, not factory standard. She peeled it back. The numbers didn't match the others. Military grade? Definitely not stock. "Who sells a rig like this?" she muttered. "I didn't ask questions," Jack said almost too casually. "Some things are better left ungoogled." Grace shot him a look. He held her gaze for a beat, then smirked. "I meant the truck," he added. Grace rolled her eyes but said nothing. The engine layout felt familiar, but off, like someone rearranged the furniture in her childhood home. Then she saw it, stamped into the engine block behind a spray of grime, a serial code she didn't recognize, but the prefix? That was government issue. "Jack," she said, standing upright, This is Federal Tech, maybe prototype. He didn't react the way she expected, didn't flinch, just sighed and leaned against the wall. Yeah, he said. Figured you'd notice eventually. Grace stepped away from the truck. What the hell is this thing? Jack looked at her, serious now. Something that was supposed to be stripped for parts 10 years ago. Something someone went to a lot of trouble to erase. She crossed her arms. Why bring it to me? Because if there's anyone who can bring it back to life without screwing it up or selling it out, it's you. Grace blinked. It wasn't a compliment. It was a dare, a test, and she was already failing at pretending not to care. So, what happens if I get it running? Jack shrugged. Then we find out if the people who buried it come looking. Grace exhaled through her nose, eyes narrowing. Well then, she said, reaching for her tools, let's make some noise. Chapter 3. Wires that weren't supposed to be there. It started with a hum, low, subtle, like a throat clearing in the dark. Grace paused mid-socket turn, frowning at the vibration coming through the ratchet handle. It wasn't mechanical. It was electric, pulsing in rhythm, almost intentional. She set the tool down. Jack, she called, this thing ever give off a hum before? He looked up from where he'd been sipping stale coffee in the corner. Only when it's pissed off. She gave him a look. Kidding, he added, but he wasn't. Grace leaned back into the bay, following the sound. It was coming from behind the firewall, tucked into a compartment that hadn't been touched in years, if ever. She pried the cover loose and froze. Behind it wasn't wiring, not standard wiring anyway. It was a flat, woven mesh, copper-lined, reinforced, running into a module that looked more like a military-grade black box than a truck component. No labels, no serials, just a single, etching S7. She reached for it. Jack moved before she touched it. Don't. Grace pulled back. Why? Jack didn't answer right away. When I first got it, I tried to pull that module. Truck wouldn't start for 3 days. GPS went haywire. Radio played dead air even with the keys out. Then it turned back on. By itself. Grace raised an eyebrow. And you kept driving it? Jack smiled faintly. Didn't say I was smart. Said I was stubborn. Grace squatted down to eye level with the device. This isn't just some military reject, she said. This thing's adaptive. It's reading me, like it's waiting. Jack didn't move. You said it shouldn't be here, she added. Why? He rubbed the back of his neck. Because it's not just a truck, he finally said. It's a test bed. Last I heard they called it Project Halo, designed for remote ops, environmental intelligence, autonomous learning. And it was shut down. Grace glanced back at the module. Not shut down enough. The hum grew louder, more insistent. Grace's fingers hovered over it again, despite Jack's warning. What happens if I connect it to a scanner? She asked. I don't know, Jack admitted, but the last guy who tried, his garage burned down 3 weeks later. She didn't flinch. Well, she said, standing up and tossing him a heat sensor, then we better make damn sure mine doesn't. Jack caught it. Their eyes locked. There was something there now, not flirtation, respect. And just under that, fear. Grace turned back toward the truck, only to see something she hadn't noticed before. A number etched faintly into the metal beneath the module. Faded, like it was never meant to be found. Property of Rask Intelligence Systems. She blinked. Her heart skipped. Jack went still. You know that name? He asked. Grace nodded once. Yeah, my mom worked for them. She turned slowly toward him. But she died 20 years ago. Chapter 4. The blueprint she never saw. Grace didn't speak. Not for 10 seconds. Not for 20. Just stood there, one hand resting on the truck's hood like it could explain something her mother never did. Jack took a cautious step forward. Grace? She blinked. The name on the panel still burned in her mind. Rask Intelligence Systems, her mother's old employer, the one that sent a folded flag, and a silence that never sat right. "She worked black ops," Grace finally said. "Never said what. All I know is one day she stopped coming home, and the answers stopped with her." Jack was quiet, respectfully so, the flippant charm gone. Grace peeled back another layer of wiring. Beneath the mesh was something even stranger, a biometric lock, not keyed for fingerprints but heat signatures, retinal, DNA. "What the hell is this truck doing in civilian hands?" she muttered. Jack didn't answer. But Grace saw his jaw twitch. "You knew this went deep," she said. "You just didn't know how deep." He hesitated. "I knew it was rare, special, but I didn't expect your name to be inside it." Grace stared at the panel like it might blink back. Then, like it had been listening, the black box emitted a soft chirp, and the panel lit up. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a boot sequence. But the real shock? A photo, grainy, black and white. Her mother, standing beside the truck, same model, same markings, younger, smiling, and behind her a lab coat, a badge, a file marked Halo, Phase 2. Grace stepped back like she'd been hit. Jack moved instinctively, hand on her elbow. "You okay?" She didn't answer. On the screen, a voice log began to play, static, then a voice, clear, controlled, confident, her mother's. If this unit is activated by Grace Whitaker, then Project Halo has been compromised. Protocols must be followed. And Grace, if you're hearing this, you're already part of something I couldn't stop. But maybe you can. The screen flickered. A location pinged. GPS coordinates, remote, mountains. And below it, one word, run. Jack's mouth went dry. Grace? But Grace was already moving. Toward the door, toward the fuse box, toward the truth. "We need to see what's out there," she said. "Whatever this truck is hiding, it's tied to my mom, and I'm not letting it vanish again." Jack grabbed the keys from the hook. "Then let's not waste time." And somewhere inside the truck, the engine purred, alive, awake, and waiting. Chapter 5. Shadows on the Road. They didn't take Grace's car. They took the truck. It shouldn't have started, not without calibration, not without a proper ignition sequence. But when Grace slipped behind the wheel and brushed the start switch, the engine came to life like it remembered her. Or her mother. Jack rode shotgun, one hand resting on the dash like it might bite. His other gripped the handle of a hard case, something he pulled from under the shop's office floorboard. "Just in case," he'd said. He didn't elaborate. Outside Iron Ridge, the world got quiet. No texts, no cell signal, no road cameras on the stretch they took through Old Mill Pass. Grace drove like she was chasing something she couldn't name. A ghost, a file, a mother she never really got to grieve. Jack broke the silence first. "You think the message was real?" Grace kept her eyes on the road. That recording was her, the inflection, the phrasing. She always said protocols when she meant rules. She also said to run. "Yeah," Grace said, "but she knew me." Jack gave a dry chuckle, stubborn like a wrench in a drain plug. They crested the ridge, hit the coordinates, and there it was. A concrete hatch buried in a rock face. No signs, no gate. Just an unassuming panel embedded beside a rusted service path. Grace stepped out. The air here was colder, older. The panel blinked once when she approached. Then came the voice. Digitized. Genderless. "Grace Whitaker, DNA confirmed, initiating unseal protocol." The door groaned open, 1 inch at a time. A staircase descended into blackness. "Feels like a trap," Jack muttered. Grace glanced back at the truck. "Feels like a door." They went down together, no phones, no light except what flickered on automatically, one flickering bulb at a time. It wasn't a lab, it was a vault. Shelves, screens, tech older than it should have been, but not dead. In the center, a circular station with a terminal blinking amber. A prompt, waiting. Enter primary access. Key underscore. Grace hesitated. Jack stepped forward, typed WHITAKER. Nothing. Grace exhaled, thought. Then she typed, "Hello, Grace." It worked. The lights shifted. Systems spun to life. Screens unfurled data, documents, schematics, and a warning repeating silently, Project Halo status, compromised. Below that, in red, malfunction. Detected, external override attempt in progress. Grace swallowed. Someone's trying to hijack it. Jack scanned the screens. This isn't a vehicle program. This is a networked control system. Military? Number bigger. Civil infrastructure, transit, energy, traffic systems. This thing could reroute planes or shut down city grids. Grace felt cold. And the truck? Jack pulled up the black box diagnostics. It's a mobile node, autonomous, self-repairing, but with biometric restrictions. Your mom hard-coded you in. And now someone wants it running. They didn't say who, didn't have to, because on one of the security feeds, a black SUV rolled up outside Iron Ridge Customs. 2 figures got out. Suits, sunglasses, not local. They weren't knocking. And just like that, they weren't chasing answers anymore. They were being hunted. Chapter 6. The Ignition Sequence. The feed cut out mid-frame. 1 second, the men in suits were stepping into Grace's garage like they owned it. The next, static. Jack cursed under his breath. They blacked the cameras, means they've got access to local comms too. Grace didn't move. She just stared at the frozen frame. "You recognize them?" he asked. "Number." But they moved like people who don't ask permission. Jack paced once. "We need to get out, now." "No," Grace said. "We need to finish this." She turned back to the console. The screens were still pulsing, lines of code, encrypted pathways, diagnostic echoes. At the bottom of one monitor, a blinking line. Run ignition sequence, Y or N. Grace hovered over the keyboard. Jack's voice lowered. "You don't even know what that will trigger." She nodded. "I know." He stepped closer. "Grace, if you light this up, you're not just poking the bear. You're putting a bullhorn in its ear and daring it to chase you." Her voice didn't waver. "Then let it come." She pressed Y. The bunker thrummed, low and mechanical, like the sound of thunder in metal. One of the wall panels hissed, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a second module, small, black, with red LED rings forming a pattern. Jack stepped forward. "That's not just data storage. That's a live key relay." Grace read the screen. Primary node active. Secondary systems online. External threat detected. Adaptive countermeasures engaged. Another message appeared, blinking. "Do you wish to initiate defensive linkage?" Jack muttered. "This thing has teeth." But Grace wasn't reading the screens anymore. She was listening. Because from the corner speaker, a voice spoke. "Grace, if you're hearing this, it means they found the truck." It was her mother, not an echo. A recording, personal, intimate. "They buried Halo because it worked too well, too independently, too human. We didn't build a machine. We built a conscience, and the people funding it didn't want that." Jack stared. She knew they'd come back for it. The ignition sequence is more than just a reboot. It's a wake-up call. If you link the systems, it'll expose everything, not just the sabotage, the whole damn plan. Grace's hands shook. Her chest tightened. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I had to keep you safe, but I built it with you in mind. Because you see through the noise. You feel what others miss. You are the key, Grace." The message cut out. Silence filled the vault like smoke. Jack whispered, "You okay?" Grace blinked. "No." Then her fingers flew over the keyboard. "Initiate defensive linkage." The screens exploded with data. Names, contracts, backroom deals, fabricated recalls, evidence of deliberate tech suppression. Grace had just turned on a spotlight the size of a war crime. And miles away, whoever was watching, they knew it. Because back at Iron Ridge Customs, the garage exploded. The blast registered on the bunker's seismometer. Sharp, clean, professional. Grace's home was gone. She stared at the readings, her fists clenched. Jack leaned close. That was a message. She nodded once, her voice razor-sharp. Yeah, here's mine. She yanked the module from the wall and tucked it into her pack. The truck's ignition light blinked green upstairs. System linked. Engine hot. They were out the vault and climbing the stairs before the dust settled. As they burst back into daylight, Grace didn't stop to breathe. She slid into the driver's seat. Jack jumped in after. The truck purred like it had been waiting. She gunned it. Tires screamed. They were done hiding, because now they were the storm. Chapter 7. The road they didn't plan for. The truck tore down County Route 7 like it had something to prove, which, to be fair, it did. Jack gripped the dash as Grace maneuvered around a jackknife delivery van that hadn't been there yesterday. "Left!" he barked. "Don't tell me how to drive," she snapped, threading a needle between two rusted-out sedans and punching the throttle. The truck responded like it had been waiting its whole life for this chase, suspension tight. Brakes whisper smooth, the kind of handling federal prototypes weren't supposed to have, and yet here they were, tearing through rural backroads in a machine designed to disappear. A new message flashed across the dash. Tracking system breached, pursuit incoming. 3 units, fast response. Jack swore. They're not even pretending anymore. They were never pretending, Grace said, eyes scanning the map on the tablet she'd jammed into the center console. They were watching, letting us get just far enough to make it worth the cleanup. Ahead the bridge loomed. 1 lane, no shoulder, timber frame, barely holding together since the flood. And standing in the center of it, a black SUV, doors open, men in suits, guns drawn. Grace didn't flinch. "Grace," Jack warned. But she wasn't slowing. Then, from the passenger footwell, the module lit up. A voice, hers again. Or not quite. More processed, sharper. Alternative route calculated. Divert in 3, 2. A side path appeared on the map. A blink and you miss it service trail marked as closed. Grace yanked the wheel hard. The truck jumped the ditch like it was built to fly. Dirt sprayed behind them like a signature. The bridge vanished in the rear view as shouts echoed into static. Jack finally exhaled. Okay, that was effective. Grace didn't answer. She was focused on the screen. The module had reactivated a schematic, a sprawling network of engine files, driver profiles, even communications metadata. And buried at the bottom? A name she hadn't seen since she was 17. Logan Whitaker, her father. Jack saw it too. "I thought he died before this project ever existed," he said quietly. Grace's jaw clenched. He did, or so I was told. Another alert flashed. Emergency coordinates received. Final key required. Jack turned to her. "There's more, isn't there?" Grace nodded. "Halo isn't just a defense system. It's a vault. A digital one. The ignition was just the start. Now it needs the final key." "And you know where it is?" "I do now." Jack leaned back. "You gonna tell me?" Grace glanced over. For once, she let the wall down. "He left something for me. A code, buried under the old ironworks, the place we scattered his ashes." Jack blinked. "You're telling me this ends at your father's grave?" "No," she said, gripping the wheel tighter. "This starts there." They drove in silence for a while. The forest thinned. The old rail path emerged, a forgotten route no one used except ghosts. They reached the rusted gate just before dusk. Beyond it, the skeleton of Iron Ridge Ironworks loomed like a memory with teeth. Grace killed the engine. Jack looked at her. "Whatever happens in there—" "I know," she said. But she didn't, not yet, because inside that building, past layers of rust and ash, a sensor still pulsed with life, waiting for the last Whitaker, waiting for her to be continued. Epilogue. What she woke up. The old ironworks didn't creak, it breathed. At least, that's how it felt. Every step Grace took echoed like it knew her name, like this place had been waiting, counting down in the dark. The metal rafters above were rusted through, but beneath the office floorboards, something had survived. She knelt by the file cabinet where her father used to keep spare gaskets, shop drawings, and a bottle of bourbon he thought no one knew about. Jack stood guard at the door, eyes sharp. She pulled back a panel and found a false bottom, inside dash, a flash drive, wrapped in an oil-stained rag, labeled in grease pencil, "For Grace, final key." Her hands trembled. Jack stepped closer, voice low. "Are you sure it's not a trap?" She nodded. "If it is, it's the one he built for me." Back in the truck, she plugged it into the diagnostic module. The screen pulsed, stuttered, then cleared. A new system booted. Access granted. User, Whitaker. Welcome home. Lines of code scrolled too fast to follow. Then a map appeared, not of the region, not of the country, of the entire continental grid. Satellites, traffic controls, energy hubs, military routers, all tagged. Not compromised, accessible. At the center, HALO. The screen dimmed. One final message hovered in white letters. "You didn't just inherit my name, you inherited the choice to protect or to reveal. Use it well." She stared at it for a long time, then hit save and locked the system, not to bury it, to guard it, because secrets weren't meant to stay hidden. But some power had to be earned. And Grace Whitaker? She was done asking for permission. As the truck pulled back onto the highway, taillights fading into the dusk, a satellite pinged to life somewhere over Nevada. Tracking, not a threat, but a guardian, one with grease under her nails. And the keys to the impossible. Thanks for sticking around. If this story hit something in you, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Even for old engines and stubborn people. And tell me in the comments, when was the last time you fixed something everyone else gave up on? And it led you somewhere you never expected? See you in the next one.